Okay, everybody who was in the waiting room has now been admitted, and we will admit people as they arrive. But welcome everybody to our third session, and this one I'm really pleased that a colleague of mine who isn't yet on the screen but will be, Wanda Scott, will be doing most of this because she'll be leading us in a whole discussion about asking people for money in person, kind of getting over our own anxieties about doing that, a little how to do it, who to ask, things like that. As a world part of her, she has rather vast expertise, but this is part of her expertise. So I thought actually to get started, I realized I didn't tell you this, Fia. I do want to do a breakout in just a couple minutes, maybe with 5 people each, 5 minutes. Give her a chance to set that up. So last week we really powered through like a lot of material, and I actually don't think that's a great teaching style, but I did it anyway, and I apologize. But I thought we could open that right now to say, do people have questions, concerns, comments, disagreements, anything that came up in between our sessions that you want to share with people? We just take a couple minutes and take a little bit of a breath before we launch into what in fundraising is kind of the ultimate, in some ways I think sort of the ultimate strategy, which is personal face-to-face solicitation. It is the most effective strategy. If you ask, so to give you an example, if you ask someone for money who gives away money, so this is really just to make a distinction, doesn't have money, asking people who have money, people who have money have it. That's what they do with it. They have it. What we're looking for is people who give away money, and people give away different amounts. And, some people who happen to have a lot of money are also generous donors. So we ask someone who gives away money and likes our cause. We have those two things in common. And we ask them for an amount of money we think they could probably give. And Wanda will talk to you a little bit about how we determine that. And we do it in person. We have about a 50% chance that they will give us something. 50% of the people we ask in that way will give us something. And 50% of that 50% will probably give us less than what we asked for. So this is by far, when you think of direct mail, which has about a 1% return, or emails that generally are like half to 1% return, phoning, which might be 5% return. This is phenomenal. This is phenomenal. But it does speak to what we talked about on the very first session, that probably the most common word in fundraising is no, or some version of no, or I can't, I have to think about it, I have to talk to somebody, something that isn't a straight up yes. And we have to be really okay with that. So I did want to kind of start with a reminder of that, to say this is the Raja, if those of you are yoga people, this is the Raja pose of fundraising, but they all work together. You can't do this one by itself. Sometimes people say, well, why not just do this strategy alone? Because you can't ask enough people. You have to bring people into the pipeline. It's just not, they all work together. They're like little mycelium in the, with the roots of the trees all talking to each other, and we need them all. So we'll start with that. So let me just open up and see, let's go back to gallery view, if we could, Fia, and see if there are any questions or anything. And I don't see anything in the chat yet. Anybody have any fun adventures in fundraising since the last time we got together?
I'll tell you a fun adventure.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mary. Actually, it happened just before the last session. So it was after the first one. And I happened to be in a meeting with, so I'm from a church, and I happened to be in a meeting with the financial committee, which I had actually asked to the finance committee, which looks at all the finances of the church and, balances the books basically, and discusses it. And in it, the reason I was there, because I'm not part of that committee, is, I told them, because I'm going to be heading up the pledge committee, and to me it made sense, with the pledge effort, and to me it made sense to make connection with them. And for one thing, I wanted to know what they had set as a goal for this year, because that was not at all clear to me, the year we're in already. And that's another whole thing. But one person in that meeting said, oh, I meant to be involved last year and I just was so, busy, I just couldn't do it. So I want to be involved this year. I want to help you with it. I went, oh my God, I think I love you. And then I turned to the others and I said, who else? Who else wants to be involved? And so a couple of people said that they would be involved, at least in giving testimonials, that kind of thing. It was so uplifting to have people say yes, at least at that stage of the game.
Yeah.
It was very exciting.
Very exciting. And people sometimes do follow the example of someone else. They think, well, if she can do it,
Yeah.
maybe I could do it. Yeah. So, yeah, so that's really terrific. That's a great story. And it does speak to how fundraising does need to be really highly distributed, the task of it. No one person can do, even half of the stuff that needs to be done. So very good. Anyone else?
Irene looks like she has her hand up.
Okay, Irene, go ahead.
One of the fundraising efforts I'm involved with is a very small church in Central Florida. But I have other volunteer work I have done over the years. And I made the friend of a lady in Clearwater in 3 different ways, in 3 different volunteer activities. We just kept crossing paths. She walked into our little church last month and handed us a $10,000 check for our building fund. We've never asked her for money.
That's amazing.
I mean, it was like, wow. And now we couldn't know, as you say, we could not know what was going on in the background. In the background, she had sold her home. She's single. She's moving an hour in the other direction from us and wanted to make sure that in this area, which is a pretty wide area we serve in Florida, that we keep a UU church planted. Who knew? It was the result, as you say, of a network of relationships. And she did not participate in a wide call we put out to the entire region a few years ago, but she kept it in her mind. And when she had the funds, voila.
Yeah.
I joked and said, if I wouldn't have had so much trouble getting up off the floor, I probably would have fainted. It surprised me so much. But wow, what a lesson.
Well, that's the thing. We don't know what people have. We don't know. We put out our message, and there's an interesting study actually that's very parallel track to this, of this very large agency in New York City that decided to call and thank. Well, they wanted to test the idea that calling to thank donors actually would yield more money and more strong relationships than not. And those of us who are in small groups, like most of us here, we always look to these organizations because they have 100,000 donors, so they can do all these experiments, with in a way that we never could. So they picked random sample, 5,000 donors to call, and 5,000 donors who simply got a thank you note. So the 5,000 donors got a thank you note and a thank you call, and 5,000 simply got a note. And so the next year they look and they pull out, very interesting, they pull out all the people that got called, but the record showed there was just a message was left. No one talked to them. So from the point of view of the person calling, it was making the next thing up from nothing. They left a message and they moved on. That there was 35% greater retention among those donors than among the ones that only got a thank you note. And I can't remember now, I have somewhere that they also tended to give a lot more money. So just that, like we think, oh, I just left a message, it was nothing, but the person got the message. Oh, that was so nice. They called and left a message, right? We don't know ever how things are landing and what causes a person to give, or sometimes actually not to give. Of course, the opposite can be true. let's see, a couple things in the chat. We got some dollars for matching opportunities through 2023, trying to figure out how to leverage. Yeah, matching is great. You know, so I have a lot of people, and I would say I'm probably one of them, that say it doesn't mean it doesn't mean anything to me. I would probably never give just because of a match. But there are people that love matches. It's sort of like a bargain. It's like, you know, 13 cents each and 2 for 29 or something like that. So they love it, and it never does any harm. It doesn't, no one, I'm sure in the entire world there is someone who's been offended by a match, but I have yet to meet that person. It just seems kind of, you know, it's either kind of does no harm or it does good. So matches are kind of fun, and also especially if they're very time limited, you know, we have to do it by this date. There are donors that actually genuinely put up a match, and they actually genuinely will not meet. There's a dollar for dollar match or something, they genuinely won't meet it, and that's kind of a fun thing too. This person says we're working to bring our board into a relationship building fundraising posture. You know, if they really have never done anything like this before and they're kind of showing up a little shy, a little uncertain, I would really start with something like thank you calls. It has a good effect. It's easy. People can do it. You know, the great thing now is not like the old days, and some of you are old enough to remember dial phones, and the phone rang and you had to, you know, you sort of had to answer the phone because there was no message machine, like who might it be? Now there's none of that. Like no one answers the phone unless they want to. It's just a lot better. The phone is just a much more interesting thing. Or, you know, a thank you email even can do a good trick if it's kind of personalized. I noticed, Mrs. Jones, you've been giving for 5 years. That's terrific. Let me tell you 2 things that have happened over the 5 years that you have been a part of because of your giving. That is very, very nice. So somebody said, is there going to be cliff notes from this course? Well, you can pull out from the slides. You can pull out the slides that you think are most useful for your stewardship team once after Wanda's presentation, and she might probably give you some tips as well. All right, so I want to just kind of put us into little breakouts. Again, maybe about 5 people each for about 5 minutes. Another chance to maybe know some new people, or, you know, the way randomness of breakout rooms, you might be the same people you were in before, but kind of share when you think about strategies. This is what we were talking about last week, picking strategies. And of course, Haley really gave us a pretty in-depth look at digital and online strategies. How do you choose them? Are they working for you? What did you think about as you went through that? Just share with each other a little bit. We'll just take a few minutes and kind of another way to get to know a few more people in the room. So Fia, thanks. They're all coming back.
They'll be back in 45 seconds or so.
Okay, some people came back early.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also really glad today is really sunny day. So we're not, the first day was like this pouring rain. I wonder if I'm going to lose power and be cut off. So, but so far, knock on wood, we haven't had that. All right, here comes everybody. All right, before I just do a couple more things, I did want to introduce you to Wanda Scott, and she'll be coming on in a minute. Wanda, if you can wave, and people can find the waving hand in there. Oh, actually, you know what you could do? You could raise your hand from the reaction, and that will put you in the front box.
There we go.
Yeah, there we go. So Wanda is a colleague of mine. She and I worked together when she was the development director at Pacific School of Religion. Worked a little bit there and done some other stuff over the years. And Wanda is beaming in from Costa Rica. So really, yeah, this is a great thing about Zoom. So anything that came up in your breakout rooms that you want to share with the group that you learned either from someone else or that you did yourself? Yeah, someone says initial phone call is going to be all about relationship building, not necessarily an ask for money. That's exactly right. In fact, I think I shared with you, but I'll say it again. When people, if people see on their phone, they see the name of your organization come up on their phone, or your name, and they know you a little bit, what you want is for them to have no idea what you're going to say. If they see the name of your organization, they know, oh, this is a fundraising call, and then they just swipe it away. But they don't know. You're going to invite them to something, you're going to tell them something, you're going to thank them, you're going to update them. They have no idea. So that's a very, very important kind of thing there. All right, let's just review a couple things. I'm going to share my screen here. So this is kind of what we're trying to move past, right? This kind of amateur hour fundraising that I see all the time. And I was just with a group the other day where I said, well, how much do you need? And they said, well, as much as we can get. And I said, well, what do you think you'll spend? Well, you know, whatever we spend, whatever we have. It was just, I just thought, oh my God. And you know, this organization's been around for like 20 years. They should know a little better. But one thing I wanted to kind of summarize from last week is the very, very strong importance of having every entry point to your organization. Anytime, any way that I would find out about your organization, one of the things I would find out is that you seek donations from people like me. And me is whoever, like the whole range of people. Any kind of person would think, oh, I am welcome in this group. What I have to give, my $5, my $50,000, my $500 is welcome in this group. People who give larger gifts, 500 and up, 1,000 and up, they know that their gift is welcome. There's no doubt about it. So the more uncertainty, the more fragility is in the smaller gifts, the $25 and $50 gifts. Do I see people like me represented there? Do I see those numbers represented there? Do I ever see a story about someone like myself? And this is where, of course, Alexandria Octavia-Cortez often says, people cannot imagine that they could be the kind of person that they never see. And that's why it's so important to have really representative photographs, representative amounts, representative stories. So, and remember that people find about, and especially nowadays, there are people that will never come to the physical site of your organization. In fact, some of you, I think, don't even have a physical site. So, I mean, that's a whole new style where we work remotely, where the work doesn't require a place. But some people will never come there. Some people will mostly know about you from your website. Your website is like your house. It's a virtual house. If you're going to have people over as guests, you've got to think of people visiting your website as guests. When you have a guest over to your house, generally you put a few things away. You tidy up a little bit, you make it seem kind of welcoming. And that's the same when you go to a website and, they've done, say, I don't know, something in December, they had an event in December and it's still being advertised today. You kind of have the sense of this is a house that's not well kept. And it's kind of a turnoff. So all your social media, and Haley really emphasized, and I would underline again, don't be on every platform. Pick a couple of platforms and really do them properly. Don't spread yourself too thin. Kind of think about it. I mean, I think, and there may be political reasons why you would be on one platform and not another. Maybe looking at, through a donor survey to find out what social media your donors are using. But everywhere on your website, the Donate Now button is not hidden. It's very present. It's very clear. And it doesn't require filling out a whole long form in order to make a donation. You just go there, and it also shows you different ways to donate, I think is really important. But really, we get points when every icon on your website across your navigation bar, even membership, what we've done, programs, anything like that, history, that everything has a link back to the donate button. So in other words, I don't have to go from about us or who's on your board. I don't have to go from that page back to the home page, back to the donate page. I can go directly from there to the donate page. So I don't lose any time there. This is really important. And of course, that your donors also can speak really well about you. And I think every once in a while to write to all your donors and say, be sure to tell friends about us. Be sure to tell friends blah, blah, blah about us. Not just mention us, but mention this name. To reach out to donors. Who is most likely to know the kind of people that would give money to your group, or people that give money to your group? People hang out with people like themselves. So to write to the donors and say, you know, if you know anyone who would like to join, or to have an event where they can join, and it's particularly a Zoom, it can be invited to a Zoom call. That's really important, but give people messages to use. So everywhere we know that people raise money from people like me. And I would really do an audit of your organization and make sure that that is true. Make sure that people are really clear about that. And this kind of, I want to kind of move to turning the program over to Wanda just now. But I think that kind of audit also allows you to really think about your philosophy of fundraising, that everybody is invited to make a donation, and make sure that that's true. I mean, we all kind of give lip service to that. Of course it's true. Of course we really believe that. But would someone else perceive that? You know, I was looking at the images of a direct service agency the other day at a website, and they serve, you know, housing people that have very strong housing insecurity, homeless, a lot of people with mental health issues, drugs and alcohol, and all the people that they showed that they serve were kind of, you know, very down and out looking. Obviously, they look like who they are, but all the donors are in this whole other category. But one of the stories that they have that was not illustrated at all is that some of the people that they've served over the years, this is about a 50-year-old agency, that they've served over the years, now serve on the board. And I thought, why not, you know, why not cross that line a little bit, kind of, rather than making this big divide. Here are the people that help, and here are the people that are not helped. And, you know, some of you, a lot of congregations on today are familiar with liberation theology. One of the very, very important points in liberation theology is the notion of the greedy giver, that there are people, and this is, you know, sort of white, liberal North Americans, a lot of us, there are people that can only give. That is their image. I'm a giver, and they can never say, help me. But in fact, one of the most powerful things you can say to someone else, and the person who illustrated that by saying, who else wants to help me? And then two people step forward, first one person and then two more people step forward. Those are the two most very powerful words. Help me. I need help. I can't do this by myself. I need you. That is super powerful. So don't be a greedy giver. Be willing to receive. Be willing to receive. So I am super delighted now to turn the virtual podium, or whatever this is, over to my colleague Wanda Scott. And Wanda, I'm just going to let you take it away, but I just so appreciate you being willing to share your expertise today. I will help with monitoring the chat, and we'll have time, of course, all the way through to ask Wanda questions. And Wanda is a wealth of knowledge on a variety of fundraising topics, but I asked her to focus her vast knowledge on one, which is this whole world of asking for money in person. So thanks, Wanda.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here today. And I'm so happy Kim invited me to join in on this series of talking about the things that I'm very passionate about, which is fundraising. And so let's get started, because we have a lot to cover. And I think I was a little ambitious in my content. So we'll get up. That's not a picture I wanted you to see. Okay. All right, that's the picture you're to see. Okay, so fundraising for social change. This is the series you've been involved in. It's our third session, asking for money in person. As I said, my name is Wanda Scott. I live in the Bay Area, but I'm currently traveling abroad. And this is the first time, you know, I guess it would be with Kim, where I could be kind of my authentic self, where I would ever have a picture of me hanging upside down on a zip line. But there it goes. So I've been in nonprofit for a little over 25 years. I started off in theater, and then fundraising over 20 years. I've worked for community organizations, university foundations, and also a seminary, a progressive seminary in the Bay Area. Most of my career, I worked for organizations that are social justice and equity focused. And I really have a commitment to success and whatever area you're in and whatever area of your life, and balance and a little bit of fun. And so I think, we take sometimes ourselves really seriously when we're involved in these very heavy kind of causes, but I think we all should make sure we have a dose of fun and enjoyment in our life. So today, here's a few goals for us. One, I want you to walk away and be able to identify the ways in which you can overcome some of your barriers or overcome any barriers you have to asking for money. Develop your own personal solicitation style approach, and also walk away with some guidelines around donor meetings, which you probably have touched on some of that. And then also, hopefully, you'll be inspired to discover more joy in fundraising. When you're working with people, meeting with donors, that you will find it as an opportunity to share the wonderful, wonderful opportunity you have to connect them to a mission. All right, so let's do a little poll. Maybe. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'd love for everyone to participate in this. Tell me your level of comfort with fundraising. So are you very comfortable? Comfortable would like to build skills, somewhat uncomfortable, or very uncomfortable. Okay, we're moving. I think we have a few more people, yeah. 40, 50, yeah, I think we're about there. Yes, there we are, 100% answered. So it looks like 44% is somewhat comfortable. That's good. That's good. Sometimes I get people on the second half of this poll. So that's good to know that there's some comfort level there. And also there's those who have experience, but just want to build your skill set. It's great. But those who are uncomfortable and very uncomfortable, I hope at the end of this, if you don't feel fully out of your category, that you are hopeful about where you will feel as you continue to build those fundraising skills, because it is a skill and you have to build it. Thank you. So let's end the poll. Oh, did I share the results? I didn't share the results. Okay, so I'm not good at that. All right, so there's the results. So let's head on to the next slide. Okay. Stop sharing. Not sure why it's. There we go. Yes, positive reframing. Or I should have maybe just said reframing, but positive. Like we want to think about some of the ways in which we hold maybe less than positive or less than favorable attitudes or behaviors towards fundraising that create some barriers for this. So here's some myths about fundraising. You need to be an extrovert. You have to have rich friends and connections to be successful. That's true, but we'll talk about where the truth comes. There's a secret formula. So there's something, people never know what you do as a fundraiser. They never know. They have no idea how they think you walk out in the street and ask for money from strangers, and it's sort of, but not really. But there's no secret formula. There is a process, there's strategy, there are systems in place, but nothing that's secretive. A myth is that you have to be aggressive and relentless. And I would say absolutely not, because you don't want to damage relationships. And then maybe not so much a myth, but a mentality, a scarcity mentality. Oh, there's not enough money. We don't know anyone with money. We don't know how. Just thinking negatively about the resources that are available. We understand that many of us are going after the same donors or same type of resources. But the mentality is a big part of fundraising as well. How do you think about the resources that are available to you? And here's some truths. There isn't a personality type required for being a good fundraiser. You don't have to be extrovert, you don't have to be introverted, you don't need to be an ambivert. It's not that at all. Your networks help, but you can develop networks and connections. Those are things that you actually can develop. It's not that you have to come with them inherently. There is a science and an art to fundraising, but no real secret or set formula. You develop an approach that works best for you. And we'll talk about some of the elements that I think are important when you develop your approach or your style. But ultimately, fundraising is connecting resources and passion. You have to just be a really good storyteller. You need to be able to connect with folks and you need to be able to tell the story. And so it's not, you know, if you're a good communicator and you enjoy and believe in the mission, it doesn't matter if you're an introvert, you can still fundraise very well. And also this, the mentality part, the abundance mentality. There are resources out there to support our mission. We have to be creative and be consistent and try to find those resources. All right, so here's my little buddy. He's actually not my buddy. I found him in an image library, but he wants to inspire you around the fact that fundraising can be a joyful experience. You know, I love fundraising. And the reason why I stayed in it as long as I have is because I love meeting people. You meet so many wonderful people, and you're able to connect people's passions, their interests, their stories to a mission. And that is very joyful and fulfilling, I think, as an individual. So one, yeah, connecting passionate and philanthropic people. When I say philanthropic, that doesn't mean rich. It's not synonymous with rich. It's giving folks who give, business organizations to causes that they care about. You play a critical role as a fundraiser in sustaining the organization into the future. I think that's really, really important. The work that you do now feeds and sows into the future. As a fundraiser, there's times where I have worked in organizations and I just started and we get this big gift. This donor decides to give a big gift. I've been there like a month, right? The reason why I'll get credit for it, right? Because I'm the fundraiser. But in reality, for the last 10 years, fundraisers have been sowing into the relationship with that donor. And then I show up 10 years later when those fundraisers are gone, and they started the early part of the relationship, and I reap the benefits, right? In terms of recognition and knowing that that's going to be able to support the organization. So what you do is sustaining the future. And I think there's joy in that. You meet great people, and it increases your ability to communicate and to think creatively. Sometimes the approach that you're taking with the donor or approach which you're trying to engage new donors, you have to constantly be thinking about how do we reinvent ourselves as a fundraising team. And as I said, is immediate and long-term fulfillment. So now let's talk about why maybe some of us are not experiencing all of the joys of fundraising, or ways in which we want to build our skills, strengthen our skills around fundraising. And sometimes there may be some barriers in place. It may not always be just skill. There may be some other things that are happening that can keep you from being successful. So we're going to just take a few minutes here, and I'd love for people to raise your hands or raise the proverbial, the little icon hand, or put in the chat as you'd like. We want to talk a little bit about intersections of your social location. And I know you've hit on money stories, but this is really talking about how does your social location, so that's gender, sexual orientation, race, political views, religious views, ethnicity, personal taboos, inform your views on money and your engagement with people and institutions with it. So think about those intersections in your life. And maybe for some of you, you know, I grew up in a household where money was talked about openly. And I never had any taboos around talking about money. So it makes sense that fundraising just felt very natural to me because I'd been around people that raised money. My father was a pastor, so he was raising money all the time. And I was around a lot of people who raised money. So my perspective on it is informed, right, by that experience. And so what are some of the ways in which your experiences, your social location is potentially creating some barriers around, or not maybe creating barriers, but just identifying the ways in which maybe some attitudes or behaviors about money or views on money and your engagement with institutions and people with it. And I would even add without it, because that can also be a part of your social location, personal taboos, and that. So I'll give you a second. I'm trying to open up my view here. There we go. So we have some chats. Let's see. Yeah, if you want, if you'd like to share, you may not like to share, but I'd love to see if a few people would be willing to share, whether it's raising your hand or putting a message in on the box. Is that Sir Albert? Is that correct?
Sir LeBaron.
Okay,
So,
good.
yeah. Good. So yeah, I'll go. So I've got kind of a interesting kind of relationship with money. I grew up in the projects, yet I also had like a really wealthy grandparent, and also just in my church upbringing, there were a lot of really kind of wealthy people at our church and folks like that. So I was able to kind of have a fairly mixed relationship like across the board. I think how that's like influenced me, I think for one, I'll say that the more like quote unquote successful or more I've seen how money operates and I've gotten older in life, I think definitely the more radical I've gotten. Like the world of fundraising, the world of how much there is out there compared to what so many folks grow up with is just shocking to me every day. Yet it's a couple of things I've noticed is the sense of opportunity that I have is so much greater than a lot of the people I work with about like what's possible. So, you know, because I've seen this trajectory of where I've come from to like where I am now and the spaces I'm in now, it's when we're talking about, can we raise this huge amount of money in a small amount of time? I think it's like, well, yeah, we can, like it's out there. So I think there's opportunity in that, and then folks who are from more low-income spaces, like we have a lot of drive and ambition and a sense of opportunity because we've actually done some of these like huge leaps forward ourselves.
That's a really good point. I've not heard someone respond in that way. That's a really good point. Thank you so much for sharing. I see in the comments, there's someone from Romania. You said we openly talk about how much salary one receives. Yeah, that, I don't know if I openly talk about that, but I didn't know how much my parents brought into the house. So I don't think kids know that at 9 years old. But yeah, good. And then we have Laura, and is that Sophie? I'm assuming that's Sophia. Laura, Mingport's hard for me. I did not want to put others in that position. Stuff I didn't like. Yes, I get this a lot, Laura. So you are definitely not alone. People that may have come from backgrounds where financially didn't have a lot of money, or they may want to donate more and they're unable to do that they feel like it is a burden to others, or they don't want others to feel uncomfortable if they aren't unable to, or they don't, and you don't like being pressured, and so sometimes you can feel that way. And I think that's a really valid response to fundraising, particularly from your context. But reframing that would, you know, we understand that to give is a way of showing our own gratitude, right? And so I think sometimes reshaping that and seeing it as a way for people to be able to connect their passion to a mission, and that you're not actually pressuring them. And now there are cases where people do strong arm, but if you're just inviting people, I always tell people to think of asking people to give as an invitation. It's like if you say, oh, you're welcome to come to my house, you're not strong arming them. If they don't come, it's fine. You still have a good relationship with them, but it is definitely an invitation. Let's try to do a couple more and then move on. I'm grateful for having a wide range of money resources. I know that that's sometimes an important commitment. Absolutely. Absolutely. And thinking differently about what a gift means, the importance of the gift, or the importance of a gift. So a $5 gift, and I know this as a fundraiser, anyone who's done annual fund knows those gifts add up. And so we encourage everybody to give their best gift, and all of that adds up. Growing in rural, we have people in rural parts of living in suburban Detroit, interest in positive health, and connect with others. Okay, good. All right, let's move on. I think hold on to some of those who had some of the things that you feel might be barriers. Hold on to that as you go through the rest of the series, as you continue to think about developing your skills around fundraising. What are some of the things that you can work through? So here, how do we remove these barriers or work to remove them? Identify aspects of your money story. Be confident when you ask for money. That's why I tell people, if you do not believe in the mission of an organization, don't work there. If it's not a passion, like if you don't care at all about animals, do not go work for an animal shelter. Like, don't go work there. Go work somewhere that you're passionate about, so that, you know, what leaves the heart reaches the heart, right? And so people will feel that. So, you know, make sure that you have a connection so you can confidently ask for money. Check your assumptions and biases. This is really important. And I think this goes for everyone across the board, even myself. You have no idea what the donor, the individuals that you're meeting, will say or do. And regardless of who they are, where they live, what they have, what you think they don't have, be open. So always remaining right before you walk into a meeting, really being open to the possibility. And I love what Sir Albert said about understanding. I think there's a level of faith when you feel like you've progressed from one stage of life to the next, and you understand things can change and things can get better. So I think making sure we always check our assumptions and biases, get comfortable with no's. For every yes, you get about 3 to 4 no's. So about 20%, 25%. So don't take it personal. That's really hard. I've had conversations sometimes where I went in the car and cried. But for the most part, I don't take it. It's because people could be, you know, rough when you ask for a lot of money. But don't take it personally, and really think of this. No is not a no forever. It's a no, not now. No, just not now. It's not the right timing. So but you do have to do a lot. You got to get several no's sometimes before you get the yeses. Be prepared. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Practice, 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 and then practice some more. Really, really work on how you communicate with your donors, how you want to talk about whatever it is you're raising money from. Try different ways, different styles of doing that. It's going to be really important, so it stays fresh. Because it could get, you know, if you're fundraising, if you're actively fundraising, it can get stale, the messaging can. So always be thinking about, how do you tell the story different? What are new stories? What are different angles to talk about this? How do I demonstrate this differently to a donor? I think that's really important. So really quickly, everyone on this call is involved in some way with a religious institution or congregation. And we are a special group of folks doing this work. And we're working with a very specific type of audience. And I think one of the wonderful things about working in this space is not only just the loyal and commitment, there's a really, really strong focus and dedication of our donors on legacy. They really want to make sure, not that they're recognized for the next 20 years of helping to build a building or helping to launch a program, but really that the work that you do is so tied into your own identity and your own beliefs that you want to make sure this is around for generations to come. And I think that is really, really great about religious and donors and folks that are connected to organizations. Give very generously, give to multiple types of organizations. Some of them are very similar to our own, so there's some friendly competition, and I think you should think of it that way. That you are working you're in the same similar spaces than others, and so how do you keep your messaging fresh? How do you keep talking about your stories in ways that continue to engage? And we know that we're dealing with a couple of things around, you know, this type of giving or these types of social contexts for giving. Declining membership in the church, and also restrictions around giving. So some organizations don't give to religious institutions, right? And so you have to constantly be staying on top of where the money is outside of the kind of immediate network you have. So there's some extra work to that when you're in these very specific type of spaces, but there's still a lot of opportunity and generosity for us to continue to build these institutions. All right, I'm gonna pause for a second. I know I talk really fast and I'm trying to pace myself, so you can catch on. But if there are any questions, anything that I kind of breeze through that you wanna reflect on or give a response? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to preparation for solicitations. There we go. So we have another poll. I think. Maybe. So, okay, there we go. All right. Let's see, in that poll. I don't know why it's doing that. Okay. Okay, we'll stop. Oh, wait. Can we run it again? Okay, I'll relaunch it. I'll relaunch it. Sorry, guys. There we go. So how many of you had experience asking individuals for $1,000 or more? Oh, yeah, there we are. So it looks like about a third of you have very little experience in that. Well, over half have very little experience to no experience to very little on raising $1,000 or more gifts from individuals. And then about 43% of you have some experience to a lot of experience. That's good. That's good. Great. Okay, there we go. All right. So I know we've talked a little bit about, I heard at some point in the conversation earlier talking about stewardship, and stewardship conservation are very much tied in together. You know, you want to build authentic relations with donors. I think that is key and super important when you think about the relationship being a long-term relationship. And so that is making sure that you show up honestly, actively listening, wanting to get to know the person's interest and who they are and why they're committed to your organization is really important to understand. People give to people, even though, you know, that's why you have to show up and put your best foot forward, because people do give to people and they want to feel like they can trust the people they're giving to and trust that the organization is meeting their mission. A relationship is cultivated over time. Sometimes those first meetings it's inappropriate to ask for a gift because you're getting to know that person. And it's really important that you do get to know them, because then you can know exactly the type of gift you should be asking for. And you get an idea, more of an idea of maybe what their giving has been. And so really cultivating those relationships, getting to know your donor. This may not seem as obvious, but CRMs are really important, or donor databases are really important around building relationships. Trusting relationships with your donor is a place where you capture all of the information about your donor or your prospect, their interest levels, summary of the conversations you have, next ups and follow-up. This is really, really important so that when you're meeting with a donor over time or someone else is joining you, they can look back and see the progression of the conversation so that they're not making the donor start from scratch, explaining everything that maybe they've already explained the last 2 or 3 times. So that's really important that you capture that. I will also say be mindful of what you capture in the donor record. Confidential information should not be put in there. You would not want a donor if a donor said they wanted to see their record and you had all of this very personal information that maybe they share with you or other things that was not related to a call. So I would say keep it very biographical, but high level, and provide a summary around it. But it's important that you do whatever system you have or whatever process you have to make sure that you're keeping that information first and foremost. Fundamentals here of raising dollars from major gift folks. You need to identify who the people are that you want to ask money from. And so this is not just if you're sending out a general level, a letter to everyone in your database, this is not what we're referring to, but really people who were able to give $1,000 or more, or whatever you deemed as a major gift or as an individual gift, identifying who they are. And then we're going to talk about LAI and prioritizing. So this is basically around how do you take that list and make sure that you're focusing on the individuals and you're communicating with them in ways that reflect their interest, ability, and their connections to the organization. So LAI is linkage, ability, and interest, which you sometimes will see as connection, capacity, and affinity. It's all the same. So what you want to know is, does this donor, what's the relationship the donor has with anyone that's connected with the organization? So that's the organization, the congregation, the pastor, the staff, the board, the volunteers, the executive director. Who does this donor, we have any connection to them or linkage, ability? Do they have the ability? Have they shown it in terms of their other giving that they could give at a major donor gift level of $1,000 or more? And then we have to make sure that they're interested, right? If a person is interested in animals and you are fundraising for the environment, that may not be at the top. That person should probably not be at the top of your list. Not saying that they don't give, but that's not probably the best place to start unless you have some information that they are open to giving to your organization. So make sure that when you're pulling together these lists of prospects, that you're really thinking through not only just who the people are, but these three really important things, creating strategy around that. So if the person who gives to the environment, but he has a lot of resources he gives to a lot of environmental cause, and one of the board members, that's their neighbor, and they could easily walk across the street and have a conversation with them, or would like to meet with them for coffee, then that might be the strategy, but I would not focus on that individual first. So make sure that you're prioritizing your time. We don't have enough of it. And so you want to make sure you're using it wisely. So donor meetings, let's talk a little bit about donor meetings. Donor meetings should occur on a regular basis, and that is a very broad term. So what do I mean by regular? So that means I would suggest your major donors should hear from you more than once a year, because usually that once a year conversation is asking for money. So there should be some communication with your donor. I like to do it on a quarterly basis, or at least twice a year, at the very least. One time I'm communicating with them that has nothing to do with asking for money. It's around stewardship and cultivation. It's connecting them to maybe something that's happening at the organization. Maybe there's an event. Maybe we're having some kind of special luncheon and we just want to bring them there. It's always great to have thank you events for your donors. That's a great stewardship tool, so that you remind them that you understand that this is their contributions is out of their own generosity. Every top donor should receive at the very least a yearly visit and ongoing communication. I just said that. Meetings should be scheduled in alignment with fundraising benchmarks. So what that means is, if you know that your end of the year is December 31st, I would recommend that somewhere around halfway through the year, you should have half of your money in. And if that's not the case, and a lot of people come in later in the year, then you need to be thinking about, how do I move some people a little earlier so you're not in that crunch? So think about how much you need to raise, think about some points, check-in points within that calendar of time, and then think about who you need to be visiting with to help to meet those goals. So it's really making a really big picture of what you're trying to accomplish, and then being very tactical in terms of when you're going to meet with people, when you're going to ask for money, knowing that all of that is voluntarily, we don't have control over that, but just being very intentional about that and scheduling it in. Meetings can include key organizational partners. It doesn't always have to be just the fundraiser. Sometimes it's the fundraiser and someone else. And donors should always know, when you ask for a meeting, what the purpose of it is and who will be in attendance. So always let them know. Don't surprise them. No surprises, right? Don't say, oh, I'd just like to meet with you and give you an update, when actually you want to meet with them and ask them for money for a capital campaign. Just tell them we're having a capital campaign and we're starting it off, and I want to talk to you about the campaign and how much we're trying to raise. Like, just be honest, because they're not, it's not like they don't know, right? They know at some point you're coming to ask them for money. So meeting prep, what story will you share? Make sure to set goals and objectives of your meetings, and I'll show you some examples of that. But make sure, maybe the meeting is, a goal of the meeting is to see if they could help you identify some other people that could give money. Maybe that's one of the goals of the money. If they could share, if they can introduce you to a few folks. What are some of the objectives? Make sure you're very clear, and don't have a whole list. It could be a couple of them, 2 or 3, but make sure you're very clear, especially if you're going with someone else, about what it is you want to accomplish when you meet with them. Perform some research and be a little careful here, because you don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but know who you're meeting with. Know what they've given to you in the past. This is really important. Donors don't like when you don't know what they've given in the past. I like to always present donors with giving history, a lifetime of giving history, so you can tell them you've been giving since 1980, and since 1980 you've given us $350,000 a year. Most of the time they're shocked, because they might not even be a huge giver, but they're like, wow, I've really made a huge investment in this organization. And so I think it's important to do that if it's possible. And also, even going back to kind of who to bring, make sure you're bringing the right people to the meeting. Make sure it's the best persons and sometimes it's just you. Sometimes it means a board member. Sometimes it means a volunteer. Sometimes it means another staff member. Make sure you're really thinking about who's in that meeting for solicitation and what the roles are around that. So yeah, be clear, no surprises. Be compelling and concise in your email to the donor. Right? So no 6-paragraph emails, no 3-sentence emails, unless you know the donor really well and you can just say, hey, Wanda, I want to meet, talk about the fall campaign, right? You might could do that if you know them very well, but for the most part, make sure that you give them introduction, talk a little bit about something maybe that is exciting happening with the organization, something new, ask them about their vacation if you knew they went on vacation, but make sure that they're going to read it and then be clear about what you want. Also, I always encourage people, the donor sets the time and the place, unless they ask you to set the time and the place. And so always be mindful of that. I always ask them, when is a good time for you over the next 2 weeks? You can do that. Where would you like to meet? Or if it's Zoom. Sometimes when I was in the Bay, I would give people the option. Do you want to meet Zoom? Do you want to meet in person? Let them know, it'll be me and, Lisa will both be on, we'll be meeting you that day, and we'll be there to talk about our new programming. So be very clear about who's coming. If you don't hear from them, I give them a call back in a week, and I usually make about 3 attempts, and then I roll them back down the list. So I move them down the list, and then I start with another group of donors. But make sure if they don't call you back, it doesn't mean anything negative. You shouldn't think that way. They could be busy. And so you may have to circle back to them, but at least give them at least 3 times to respond to you. And you can do that in a number of ways: phone, email. Sometimes, I find that when people won't respond by phone, they respond by email very quickly. So figure out what works for you and make sure you don't give up. And then if they don't, just roll them back into the list and move forward. All right, so here's some more tips around meetings. I always encourage people, make sure you have some kind of takeaway or information for the donor. So whether that's, a 1-pager or a link to something on your website or a short video or PowerPoint, some kind of visual for people when you're meeting with them. I always think that's good. Make sure that you're always confirming. If it's a couple, or if it's an older parent with a child, and they make the decision with the child and the older parent make the decision together, make sure that both of them are invited in that meeting. If you know that information, that's why the notes on the donor are really important, because you would say, Wanda always meets with her son, John. This is really important. So make sure that that kind of information is there and you're doing that.
Wanda?
Right. Yes.
Wanda, just one question I think is really good. You can speak to. Marjorie said, my current organization doesn't have a history of donor meetings. We're in a very rural area. Any suggestions for setting up first meetings when it's not part of the culture?
Have you done Zoom meetings at all? Are they answering?
She sent this in by chat.
Hi, this is Marjorie. Can you all hear me?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
go ahead, Marjorie. Great.
Hello, hello. Hi, Wanda. So I used to be the director of a foundation, and so I have a lot of experience with those one-on-one meetings, and like you said, the donor is expected, they know you're coming, all of those things. I'm now the director of a community center in a small rural area. And those one-on-one donor meetings are not part of the culture. The donations tend to be a little bit more spontaneous and donor initiated, or I'll talk with them when they come to the center about something fabulous that's happening, and maybe a specific ask, or maybe it's like making sure they know what's going on and then they show up with a check. There's a little bit of magic that's different from other groups I've worked with. And so I'm curious, I'd like to make the donor visits maybe not obvious, maybe not automatic for everyone, but to introduce that idea and bring it into the culture. And I'm curious in that context, if there's a different sort of first meeting that is more about not so much relationship building, because we've got the relationships, but something around creating a culture of annual giving and them knowing that they can come to the organization and get specific updates and that it's tied to what they give. So is that additional information making the question any more clear?
Yeah, no. I think creating a culture or shifting a culture is one step at a time.
Yes.
One foot in front of the other, and you keep doing it, right? And so it takes repetition. I think there may be ways, and I'm not familiar with, I've not worked in rural communities, but I think there will probably ways when they're at the center that you can engage them, whether it's through materials, whether there's through some kind of, if everyone if you get a lot of your folks coming in at certain times of the day, maybe there's a table you have, or maybe there is some type of slight, short little event with some refreshments and people talking about the organization. I would encourage in that it might be easier in those types of activities to then one-on-one ask people, would you love to have coffee here? Maybe the next time you're here, before you come, we can have a cup of coffee in my office and just kind of chat. I mean, I think, a rural environment might be a lot, depending on the rural environment, might be a lot less formal. Right. And so you don't want to come off as the white suit, right? The person kind of coming in and saying, oh, this meeting. So I think that you go with the culture. But the principles still remain the same. The follow-up, getting to know them, figuring out how they are, right? And how the community operates, and them getting to know you. That's super important. But yeah, I mean, I think I would probably choose a way to create, because if you're trying to create a culture of philanthropy, that's everyone. So I think that you have more opportunities where you're more openly talking about the things that you want to do to support the organization. Others out there might have some ideas. Kim, do you have any ideas around that? Or
no, I think those are really good suggestions. I've lived in a lot of rural communities and done a lot of meetings at the post office. Everybody's getting their mail, and you just kind of casually run into people, or you hang out at the hardware store or something. I know you're wanting to move to a break, and I'm sure people would like that. When we come back, a couple people have asked, could you speak a little bit about wealth screening? I know sometimes people find it invasive and they don't understand that it's actually aggregating stuff that is known to the public. As we are not the CIA, we're just pulling some stuff together. But maybe after the break, you could just say a word about that. One, to be great.
Oh, great. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I'll give you guys 5 minutes. Will that work?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Back. All right, there's some questions in the chat too. So let me start first with the chat questions about pledges or pledgers. Mary Vaini, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Benny, I love your response to the question about pledgers. Pledgers are donors, and it's a great opportunity. I think it made a promise to you already. and that's a big part of, and people don't always do this, but pledgers definitely need a strong stewardship. You need to be meeting with them, talking with them once a year, touching base with them, giving them updates. That's really important, in the same way that you do your non-pledged donors. That's really important. And sometimes you'll be surprised. They might increase the gift. They might increase the remaining pledges as well. So it's a great opportunity to, one, continue to secure that gift every year, because just because they made a pledge, they're not technically legally responsible, legally have to give you that money. And so make sure that you're stewarding that, giving them updates. They love to hear what's going on. And then, talking to them about some of the things you're doing, you might be able to get more. So yeah, it's the same approach. It's a little different because they've already given the gift, but you still have to steward those gifts. What just happened? I just lost my whole.
Wanda, can I,
Yeah.
while you're figuring that out, I'll just tell a little story about the minister in the church that I grew up in. Every year would say it during the stewardship drive that he just hoped people would consider raising their pledge by 1%. And then we'd all, I was a kid, but would sit and calculate, and people think, well, that's not so bad, 1%. But since he did it every year, after a bit, my father, who was an accountant, said, we have now raised our pledge 10% over 10 years. But it was very, very clever. And I think you really can go to people either in the group or individually and say, would you consider raising your pledge? There's nothing, these people are donors, and it's the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another one from Mary. So your church is an endowment. You're trying, yes. People smell, people can tell if there's fear or if you're uncomfortable with the conversation. I think honesty is really important, but how you frame it is also really important, right? And so I was part of an organization that had a dwindling endowment. They had unfortunately borrowed against the endowment. And we're in the process, they were repaying it back, but it was still not paid back because clearly we're having deficits with their revenue. And one of the things was when we had to go to some donors who either had wind of it or heard it, I just was honest. And I just said, yes, this is where we are. This is our plan to move forward, and we need everyone's help. And it's important that you believe what it is you're going to tell them. And so if you feel like the organization is in a very critical place, you say it. I just believe in being honest. And you wouldn't send that out in an annual appeal, right? It would be to the people that are closest to you, and you're honest with them, and you tell them but you have to have a plan in place, I think. But I think you stay honest. You need to work through whatever that anxiety or fear you have around communicating that, so that when you step into that conversation, that the person trusts what you're saying, and you're able to communicate to them the urgency, but also the faith you have in your ability to plan this out and think critically about how you deal with the situation in the future. So I hope that's somewhat helpful. Some of this is, we don't talk about this much, but a lot of fundraising is our own work, around wealth, money, around financial issues, all of that kind of plays out with that. I don't know why I keep losing. I keep losing that screen. Okay. There was a couple more things too. So we talked about wealth screening. Yes. So I love wealth screening, especially when I first started an organization, or if I'm working with the client. It tells you who gives to where, and to some extent, who has capacity to give. You will discover a lot of wonderful things from wealth screening. Wealth screening is not the information that is compiled into those really expansive Excel spreadsheets you get if you ever did a wealth screening, or even if you download it from Donor Search. It's all public information, every bit of it. None of it is private. So that's all public information. It's things like when people pay luxury tax, that's public information. So if a person has a boat or a yacht, or something else that's really, expensive, and they're paying a luxury tax, that's all public information. If they have public stocks, if they own a public business, all of this stuff is, it's public information. We just don't have, the average individual doesn't have the resources or even know where to start to look for this information. But what it also does is it pulls together philanthropic information. And this is super important because you could look at a person's wealth. Those wealth screenings are, I would say it's a piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole puzzle. So they help you to see one particular perspective. There are some people, their wealth doesn't show up through wealth screenings. It's completely hidden, so you don't know. Their giving is public because it's in annual reports that nonprofits get. So you could see, oh, this person gives between 20 and 50,000. The largest gift they've given is between 25 and 50,000. I'm just giving that range. But they give us $500. So now you're like, okay, there's capacity there, but why are they not giving us 25 to 50,000? That's always the question that you should be asking. But wealth, it's a great tool to use. It's not the only tool. At the end of the day, it's one of the tools, but the best tool you have is sitting across the table or getting on a Zoom and getting to know that person and figuring out where their interests lie, and what you can, possibly be able to get them to contribute to your organization. Does that answer the question around wealth screening? I think I may have went off a little bit. What are some ways to learn what a person's wealth? Is wealth screening a website? Oh, okay. So no, it is not a website. There are companies that provide wealth screening. Donor Search is one of them. What is the other one? I only use
Wealth Engine.
Wealth Engine is another one. And they have varying type of services. Some of them just gives one type of way to use it is a score, which pulls all that information together and says this person potentially could give you this much over 5 years, and there's different levels to that. I think what's really important, if you're a smaller organization, I think what you really should focus on is what is their historical giving, and what wealth screening will tell you what they think their capacity is. And you kind of focus in on those individuals as kind of your first line of prospects for major gifts. Someone asked another question. What are some ways to learn what a person's wealth? Well, that's a little tricky. If you live in California, this is a hard one because everyone's house is almost $1 million. So it's not the same in Cleveland. If you have a $1 million house, it means something very different than you have it in the Bay Area. But wealth can be seen through home ownership, through a business, what you can personally do. I think what I would say, if you're in a smaller organization, you could do like donorsearch.net, and that shows philanthropic giving, not all, but it gives you an idea of where it's giving. It's a free search engine. It's not really it's not complex. It's not as sophisticated as a wealth screening, but it could give you some information about where people are giving. That's public information. There we go. Preparing, right sizing, ask donors. What are the tools that seem needed in preparing and right sizing the ask? Yeah. So if you have a budget, you could do a wealth screening, but they could be a little expensive, depending on who you go with. I would say there's a couple of things. One is you need to have institutional knowledge. There needs to be historical knowledge on the donor. That's really important. That's what it goes back to this donor-based thing. You need to know the donor. You need to understand their giving patterns, their interests. That's really important. I think also doing any type of high-level Google search, if you don't have the resources, it's really important. Don't go down a rabbit hole, but you want to find things that do they give? Have they been awarded for some level of volunteerism? You need to know that kind of stuff. And then if you can. Real estate is one way, but ultimately, I feel like you do a general Google search, you look at what their giving pattern is again, you do the donorsearch.net, and then you go in and you have a conversation, and then you remain open to what the donor says.
I would also add, and you kind of said this earlier, Wanda, even if you found out that someone gives 25,000 to an organization similar to yours and they give you 250, you can't sit down and ask them to go to 25,000. Be insane. I mean, some of where you go with a donor is where they are with you, and that's the beginning of the negotiation, I'd say. What's the
Yeah.
gift they gave you so far?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always know in the back of your mind, there's a capacity, they're actively giving at this level. And so I always found it as my challenge is how do I get there? And each time just kind of and getting to know them, like, why are they giving that much over there and not to us, right? That would be my mind. And so like getting to know them. And you don't, and I think you also want to be mindful that although you do the research, I think do it with a level of professionalism. And so not necessarily sharing with them, well, I see you give this much, over here, unless there was an article written about them where they gave $500,000 to the endowment. You can say that's wonderful. You gave $500,000 to whatever ABC University. That's wonderful that you're so philanthropic. But I think being very mindful of how you enter those conversations when you've done the research. Just it's a tool. It's one of the tools, right? Is that all the questions? Because we do have a little time. Okay. Is that everything? All right. Making the ask. So we've talked a lot about that. I think this is really, really, really important that you communicate clearly what you would like to do and why. How much do you need to meet your financial goals and when do you need it by? So be very clear. We have a goal of $100,000 by September 30th. And this is where we're trying to get, or by the end of the fiscal year. And then we talked about strategy a little bit. This is a little kind of repeat, but thinking about how you prioritize your time, that's also really important. So I've noticed, and I remember this even when I was working, you can find a lot of ways to get out of scheduling those individual meetings. There's so much that can happen that will make you say, oh, I'm not going to spend an hour on the phone trying to make connections to donors. I got this report due, right? And so then you end up doing everything, and then you spend maybe 30 minutes, you talk to 2 people every 10, 15 days, right? So that is not going to build a program. So that's why I think it's really, really important that, one, you make sure that you're prioritizing that list and thinking about your capacity to meet that list, and then making it the first thing. The most important thing is the most important thing. And so if fundraising is the most important thing, make it the most important thing. And that means that you set your schedule. I used to have Thursdays was the day that I did my donor calls. And so I scheduled out 2 hours, and I told the associate, don't let anybody schedule them in. The only person is my boss. And even then, let me talk to him to see if I could get out of it, because it was really important that I made time to make those calls, because if I did not do that, I wouldn't get through them. So I understand that we have a lot of pressing priorities, but this is really important. And you have to create a system that allows you to do that, not just strategy in terms of donor, but also strategy in terms of you getting that work done and making sure that you've set some priorities and set some boundaries, even for your staff, your team, your family, whoever, so that you can get to these calls. So let's see. So here's some really good fundamentals. Always start the meeting with a thank you. Always. I worked at United Way, and they said it takes 7 thank yous for a person to feel thanked. I don't know if that's true. I think I feel thanked after the first one, but maybe, you feel extra thanked. I don't know, but that's what the statistic give. People give because they're asked. So you have to ask. And let's talk a little bit about that. I think some of these other ones are pretty straightforward. We don't need to go. Active listening, making sure that you can pivot when the direction of the meeting shifts. But I want to say this, when you are in a conversation with a donor and you're about to say, we're going to raise money for this community garden, And we need $50,000 to finish out this phase of the project. And we've, been asking donors to give $5,000 to, I'm just using these things, $5,000. Could we count on you for a $5,000 gift? And then the donor is processing it, right? You just ask them for, a lot of money, and they're processing it. And what happens in a lot of donor meetings that I've been in, the fundraiser gets nervous. And so now they start talking in the kind of awkward, silent space. And sometimes they almost, I call it an unask. They start rolling back the ask, and they start saying, oh, if you don't have 5, if you can give 25, and then it's like whatever you could give. No, when you ask for the amount, you should have, you practice, exactly what you want to ask. Or if you want to offer them some options, sometimes people do gift charts, which is where there's different levels of giving that people can be invited into. When you do that, be quiet. Let the donor be the first person to speak, so that they are the ones that are responding to your question. You should, when you ask the question, let them respond. Once they respond, then you move forward with the conversation. But a lot of times I've seen people get really nervous at that awkward space where the donor is thinking and having time to process, and they roll back or unask the donor when it's contrary to the goal of the meeting. So I would encourage you, when you ask, wait for the donor. The donor should be the next person speaking. Let's see. Oh, this is another one. Sometimes when you ask for money, you'll get advice, which is not what you were actually asking for. And so sometimes it happens. And so you have to be prepared to have that conversation around, whatever advice they want to give, and then invite them to support it in addition to being a part of that advice. So make sure that when you're in the meeting, sometimes the conversations will shift. Sometimes the person might be nervous that you're going to ask them money, and so they will take the conversation in a different way, but you're there to invite them to give. And this is really important. You would not be doing this if it wasn't important. And you should be able to communicate that and offer that to the donor or the individual that's sitting across from you. Gift charts. Okay. Let's try to get to that in a minute. So if you've ever, let me give you a quick example of what a gift chart would be. If you've ever seen sponsorship levels, right? There's you could be a table sponsor at 1,000, you could be a group sponsor at 500, you could be that. So it's the various monetary levels that get the organization to the goal. So if you were going to raise $500, you might say, well, I'd love to have 3 people that could give me 100, and then the rest of the people could give me 50. And so it's a very calculated way, a systematic way of raising money. And then you would say, who are the people that could give me the $100 a piece? All right, and then you put in those names, and then those are the people that it's another way of creating a strategy or segmentation. It's another way of segmentating or prioritizing. People use that as an opportunity. And then when you're in the conversation with the donor, you show them the gift chart, and you say, these are the levels in which we've been inviting people to give. Which level would you be comfortable giving today? It's just another approach to asking for money. What do you do when donors preempt your ask with a gift that is, oh yeah, they're the smart ones. So the question is from Nathan. What do you do when donors preempt your ask with a gift that is lower than what you were planning to ask for? So I used to raise money for a nursing school. Wonderful. I love nurses. I love my half sister was a nurse, but I loved raising money from nurses. I love them. They all lived to be in their 90s, and they squirreled away their money, and they were just awesome. They just these wonderful women that had, started nursing to a time where women could only choose to either be a teacher or be married, and they chose the field of nursing. So it was a great job. But I would get to the meetings and these women would have their checks already written out. And they would hand it to me in the very beginning, and I thought they're very smart. They've already known that I'm going to come and ask for something. And I think you have to deal with that on an individual basis. So if I didn't know, if it was the first time I met the individual, I would not necessarily, it did not feel comfortable for me to say, yeah, but I would like more. If I had known, after I've had a relationship with the person, then I would say, this is really great. We so appreciate this. We are also doing this. And so as you consider your gift for the rest of the year or over the next year, you know, we'd love to invite you to be a part of this as well. So I think you have to fill it out with the donor, who the donor is, but that's the only group of donors I ever had that would happen more consistently. And sometimes people give, your email triggers them to give. And so they're like, oh, yes, right, I need to give this year. And so, you know, they'll send the gift. Or I've had donors sometimes say at the meeting, oh, I haven't given, you know, how much are you asking for, right? And that doesn't happen that often, but sometimes you get folks who've been around for a while. But yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I've had that happen. And I think you really have to be sensitive to who the relationship with the donor is. A lot of times, if I didn't know them that well, which I had a big portfolio, the next go around, I would make sure that I would tell them, you know, we want to talk about a gift, so they would know that it was coming. But yeah, some people, that's what they do. What do you do when donor? Okay. I think I have everybody here, and Kim's going to cover gift charts next week as well. So conversation starters in those meetings. You know, if you know the donor, then you might start a couple of minutes just catching up. A lot of times after a while, when you know your donors, you're just catching up. You're just finding out what they've been doing, where they're traveling. Share a little bit about what you're doing. Always be sure of that. It shouldn't only be the person being vulnerable and open. You should also be doing that as well. But provide organizational updates, highlight the program or type of support you're seeking, get the feedback or ask their advice on a program plan. So those are kind of some of the ways, depending on who the donor is, that I will open up the meeting. If I know the donor, I'm definitely going to chat. I can be chatty around kind of just catching up when I first meet people, because I'm excited to see them. And so spend that time doing that. I would also recommend when you're having these conversations with a donor, and I think that was mentioned before, that you make sure you're in a place where the donor is going to feel comfortable, and you're going to feel comfortable sharing and talking and kind of walking through all of the different highlights of your program. But these are some conversation starters or lead-ins. Does anyone else have any they want to share or pop in the chat box? No? Okay. I'll give a second just in case somebody's typing. I can't tell if people are typing. Okay, so now we are going to do a little practice. A little role play. So we'll take about 10 minutes to do this. I think we have enough time. We will 3 people in a breakout. I think that still works. We're going to practice our ask. So think about your organization, your congregation, your project, you know, what it is you need to fundraise, or are you currently fundraising for? And so you're going to practice that on the folks in your group. So one person, there'll be 3 roles each round, and you'll do 3 rounds. So each person will perform all 3 of the rounds. The observer will, when you're an observer, you take time, you keep time and you take notes. So you'll be the asker, the donor, and the observer. You'll do 2 minutes to set up a role play. So you'll give some background on the donor. You'll do 5 minutes to role play the ask. and then 2 minutes to debrief, 1 minute to switch to the next asker. No, wait, wait a minute, is that right? Yeah, we're gonna have to do,
I think that's too many minutes.
it's too many minutes, yeah. So, okay, so what each person will get, 3 minutes. So we'll have to cut this down. So what I want you to do is you'll get 3 minutes. You'll need to, the person who's asking will need to role play the ask. So you'll need to ask the donor, the person who's in the donor role. Then you'll go through a scenario, and the donor, you could either accept a solicitation or reject it, however you want to do. And then you'll switch each role around everybody 3 times. And then at the end, you'll do a little debrief. So we'll cut the role play info out, and we'll cut the debrief out to the end. So the asker will make the ask to the donor. The observer will take the notes from that ask, whatever you observed from, how the person asked. Was the person comfortable? Was it clearly communicated? Then when that's done, you'll shift again. Each person will get 3 minutes. And then at the very end, you'll take a couple of minutes to do a debrief, and then we'll share out as a group. Okay. Any questions?
So how many minutes total are doing this?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
10
You'll
minutes
get about
total.
10. Yeah, 10 minutes.
Ready?
Yep.
So this is a 30-minute exercise where there's 3 people and they're each going to get to ask, or is this a 10-minute exercise for 3 people?
Yeah, so it's going to be, initially it's a longer exercise, but we're going to cut it down. So each person will get 3 minutes per role. So you'll have 3 minutes as an asker, 3 minutes as an observer, and 3 minutes as a donor.
Thank you. Sorry for my
No,
confusion.
no, it's problem. No, it's fine. The slides are differently.
Nice to meet you on that.
Go slowly.
It will boot them out in about 30 seconds.
Okay, that's fine.
He is getting
Oh.
tough.
I'll monitor the chat if you want to monitor the hand raised things. Here they come. Okay, I think we're all back, right? Is that right, Fia?
Okay, I feel like there's, I don't know, maybe I'm not looking at it right.
Everybody's back.
Everybody's back. Welcome back, everyone. So let's take some minutes to, let me share my screen again, to share out. There's that picture I want you to see. Okay. Okay, so if anyone wants to, share something that you discovered about your approach, what was helpful for your experience, anything you learned? No?
I could just say that I learned that I need, when somebody offers me $5,000, I need to be a little more excited and appreciative than I must have come across like a more matter of fact kind of thing. So that's a lesson learned.
So how would you change it? Would you just say, is it the elevation of your voice? What do you mean excited?
Well, I would just, I could express myself with enthusiasm and it would just sort of say, wow, this would make a great difference in helping us reach the goals we're working for.
I see what you're
Something
saying.
like that.
Yeah. Good, we got some stuff in chat. The importance of the pause. Passion for the cause is contagious.
Sam has their hand up from Rural Organizing Project. Sam Cordy, go ahead.
Hello, Sam.
Yeah, I realized that the way I was framing my ask was a little confusing. So I needed to slow down and make sure that it was very clear, the specific ask.
Nice. Yeah, and you don't always have a partner with you on the call, so you don't always know exactly what you're doing. So yeah, it's great to have somebody else talking or someone there observing. Sarah Ruth?
Yes, a question that came up in my demo was, is saying the exact number something that's important to include? Can one, for example, make the use existing information? So if I know how much the donor gave and the donor knows how much they gave, can we talk about their gift in general terms as opposed to their past gift, for example, and increasing the past gift by a certain percentage, as opposed to saying you gave $500 last time, can you now give $650 or some hard number? Where is is there a guidance around general speak versus specific numbers when you're speaking with someone who has the same information that you do?
Yeah, so I think it's that right there is a style or approach, so it's personal. If it depends on who the donor is, but I typically will come in knowing what I want. It depends. So if I'm coming in just for an annual gift and it's a normal kind of general support gift, I may say, thank you so much for your gift last year of $500. Would you consider increasing the gift to $750 this year? If I know that they're really passionate about a certain project I'm doing, I'm just coming in with what that ask is, whatever I've figured out or tried to qualify about them, if their ability to give me that money. So I base it on, so that's kind of not answering your question. So I think it just kind of depends on the type of ask, and it depends on your approach to the ask. So like when we were talking earlier about how, you could ask people to give at very direct levels, that's an approach. Some people are like, we're trying to get $1,000 out of 50 people, and all the 50 people they ask for $1,000. They look at maybe their previous gift and they know what it is, and that's why they're there because of that history, but it's not necessarily central to the conversation. So it just, go ahead.
I was gonna say there is a lot of evidence that when you ask for a specific amount or a range, you could say, could you consider something in the $1,000 to $2,000 range, you are far more likely to get something than if you don't name an amount at all. That's the same if you go into a store, people will buy the product where the price is on the product. They don't take it up to the clerk and ask how much it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There was someone else that had some pieces of yeah, sorry, Karen, 3 minutes is tight. I tried to give you a little bit longer to stay in those groups, but I hope you were able, even though the limited time, we're able to still find value in that practice of sharing. Does anyone else? I don't see any more hands. Okay. We'll move along. So after you meet with, this is really important because things can get lost after meeting, conversations forgotten. So make sure that you're doing an immediate thank you, email, note. that you follow up on any outstanding items of request, any other conversation or any question, and make sure you're keeping it in the database. This follow-up piece is an important way when you send that email to restate the commitment that they made. So if they said, I'm going to give you 50,000 by September 1st, you put that in that email. We look forward to receiving your gift of 50,000 by September 1st. If they said they're going to talk to their spouse or partner and they'll get back to you, you note that in that. So whatever the conversation, those highlights, those really important things, make sure that you note that in the thank you, and then tell them when you're going to follow up and make sure you follow up. And if they've requested anything, make sure you get that to them. So those are really important points. They seem simple, but they're really important in terms of when we think about stewardship and maintaining and building relationships. I think that's our, yeah, so we hope that you were able to think more about the actual practice of asking for money. Thinking about some of the barriers that keep you from asking for money or feeling as comfortable, and maybe practicing ways that you do that, and getting more comfortable in talking about money and successfully asking for it. And like I said, you have to do a lot of asking to get good at it and to be successful. And then these are my links or ways to connect to me. I'm on LinkedIn. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Wanda. So actually, why don't we come out of the screen and just see if there are any other questions for Wanda or comments? That was terrific. That was a lot of information. Pack a lot of information into a short amount of time. The big advantage, Wanda several times said, I just want to underline at the risk of repeating her, when you really don't take things personally, you're so much more able to be with the donor, right? Otherwise, I mean, anxiety is a real thing, and I don't want to make fun of it. And a lot of us struggle with it, but there is sometimes a way in which anxiety is another word for self-absorbed. Like, how do I feel? What am I feeling? What's going on with me? So like, we're really not the issue right now. The other person is the issue. And when you feel more comfortable, you kind of think, I'm going to ask this person for money and they're going to say yes or no, or I have to talk to my spouse or forget it, or I don't know, I'm going to do this and they're going to do that. Like, I've been in fundraising for 45 years. Wanda's been in, I think, 25 or 30. Hillary is on today. She's been as long as I have. We have yet, this could have happened, but I have yet to hear of anyone even being slapped, let alone being shot. I mean, nothing is going to happen except that you're going to walk away and you might not have your money. And as Wanda said, no is short for not now. And, might be short for not ever. I think we've had that experience, but it is really short for not now. So, yeah, so I think it's really important to keep in mind. All right.
Yeah. Good.
Any other final words before we let you go and back to your fun time in Costa Rica there?
No. I mean, I hope as people continue to think about the work you do in fundraising, that you continue to see the value in the work. This is hard work, which I did not say anywhere throughout this presentation. It is not easy, it's hard work. And I think you're always sharpening and developing that. And I think the more you stay rooted and grounded and continue to do, programs like this is really important. Build your network, because this is hard work, but you learn a lot from each other. And our work can be isolating. And so it's really important to have a strong network of fundraisers, because nobody understands this unless they've done it. So hopefully you're building those networks. Hopefully today you're able to connect with people, and know this is hard work, but it's I'm happy that I chose this field. There's so many other things we could all have done with our lives, and doing this is, I think, a really, really noble profession. And so hopefully you'll stay inspired and encouraged, even in the tough times, even in the times where you're anxious and nervous and, feel like you didn't do the best ask and fumbled the ask, that you keep going, because there's communities and people that, our positions really rely on. And that's really important position that you all play. So thank you so much for your work that you do, the countless hours. Sometimes people don't know how hard it is. And so I want to acknowledge that and tell you that you're appreciated, and the work that you do is important.
Well, I super appreciate having a chance to work with you, Wanda, in this. And I think it's okay. I hope this is okay to say that people are welcome to contact you if they have a question afterwards. And then we will be, of course, posting the slideshow in the Google Doc with everything else. So, all right. I want to return. I want to return to our time together. Let's see. I'm going to kind of participants can see this. Yes, current slide. So I wanted to give us a chance kind of, and we talked so much about relationships, and you can see that personal solicitation is so much about relationship building. And we can answer questions generally, like if a person says this, generally we'd say that, but in some ways when you've seen one donor, you've seen one donor. So that's the importance of knowing people. So something I'd like you to consider over the next week or so is, how are you building these relationships? I remember when I first took a training in fundraising. I think it was in 1978, and I was, however old I was, 22 or something. And the trainer said, you really want to build relationships. And I thought it was a genius. I thought that is a really good idea. That so makes sense. And then I went back to my office and I thought, okay, now I'm just going to build some relationships. And I just sat there at my desk like, what does that actually mean? What am I actually going to do? It was just so not obvious. I mean, I was very young. Am I going to, should I call somebody? But if I called them, what would I say? I mean, I don't know. It wasn't obvious at all. And so I want to break it down a little bit, because I think it is probably one, if I were to name the 5 key insights of fundraising, it would be, number 1, that everything is about getting a donor and having a person be a donor and stay a donor as long as they possibly can. But how do we do that? Every organization needs to think about their donors in a variety of ways, and Wanda talked about this, segmenting your donors. Your first time donors, how does somebody get in the pipeline? How do they feel invited to make their first gift? What are the strategies you are using to get people to make their first gift? From if you've looked at your retention rate, a number of you had talked about this. If your retention rate is, let's say it's really good. Let's say it's 66%. That would be actually almost in the Guinness Book of World Records. 2/3 of the people who gave you money one year give you money the next, right? That means if you have 1,500 donors, you need to get 500 new donors every year just to stay the same size, right? So your retention rate tells you how many people you need to get in order to not shrink. And so what is your mechanism? What is going to be your mechanism to get the 50 donors, 100 donors, 500 donors, 5,000 donors? What is it? What do you do? And those will be different strategies. The case statement, although it comes back to a fundamental internal case, which we talked about, the case that you put out to get new people is slightly different than others. Someone wrote in the chat, because there's a lot of congregations in this training, it's kind of strange to think of raising money outside of the immediate congregation, but people love, people love the Unitarians. People love you. They always, I remember I went to, I was up in Alaska one time for a training, and I was in Seward, and like all these people came to the training, and you have to, when you go to Alaska to do training, you have to go in the winter, because everyone in the summer is outside all the time. And so in the winter, it was unbelievably freezing cold, even in the training. And there are all these people sitting in the front, much older than everyone else. Everyone else was pretty young. And then they were sort of, and they were like, we're from the Unitarian Church and we're working on the Defense of Marriage Act. We're working, I think they're working against it. I think, yeah, we were against the defense of marriage, but we're in favor of the new thing. But anyway, and it was just so, it was so great. I thought, yep, that's right. And you can always, either be the Unitarians or the Quakers are always sitting in the front row in the social justice stuff. So people will help you. I think people will give, people see the institution as an important one. So I think you can raise money inside and outside the institution. That's true for all the groups here. Then having gotten the gift, that first gift, what you're trying to do then is get a person to make a second gift. And that the different, so you take all the people who gave one gift, they never gave before and they gave one gift. Now they make a second gift. That's called your conversion rate. What percentage of people who make one gift make a second gift, right? That's not the same as I mean, they may be rolled into retention, that's fine, but this is a very fragile time. Why did somebody make one gift? They had a friend who asked them, they went to an event that they liked, they were moved by a little video you showed, but you can't rely on emotion every time. What you want is for the person to give you money, to give the organization money, no matter what mood they're in. They like, oh yeah, this is my group. I'm kind of grumpy right now, but this is my group. You can't always count on having a big emotional reaction. So how do you invite people to give a second, a third, a fourth gift? And actually those are, I put a second, third, fourth, like it was all the same, but actually a second gift is different than the third gift, is different than the fourth gift. And paying much more attention to what you're doing. Don't send the same letter to your entire mailing list. Somebody who's given you money twice is very different from a person who's given you money 15 times. And you really need to begin to kind of think through how can you personalize a little bit, how can you change them? So how do you invite people to stay? I find that a lot of organizations work very hard to get people in, and then they do nothing to get them to stay. They actually, you know, they kind of don't treat them very well. And then of course, what's the point of getting one gift? The entire point of getting one gift is to get a second gift. The point of getting a second gift is to get a third gift. So then we begin to say, okay, now this person has established that they like the organization, they're giving a few times, they seem to want to be part of it. Let's test the proposition that they could give more. Let's see, let's ask them to increase. And Wanda went through a lot of ways that we do that. I think personally, I mean, personal solicitation is the best way, but you can also ask people, could they please consider doubling? Could they please consider becoming part of the monthly donor program, which we talked about last week? So somebody who gives you $50 once a year starts giving $50 once a month. That's an enormous increase. That's terrific. But what is your mechanism for pulling out from your donor list those people who actually really are probably not giving to their capacity? What we want is for all our donors to be giving the most amount of money they can possibly afford relative to how much they love us. Okay, so some people, $25, that's how much, and their true capacity is 10,000, but $25 is how much they love us. That's fine. All you can be in charge of trying to get them to love you more, so they'll give a little bit more, but we want to kind of ask them to consider increasing. And all of this depends on the fourth thing, and then I hear a question. Make sure you are in touch with your donors and you deal with them when you don't want money. Otherwise, they simply think they're an ATM. And so this is this would be part of your homework. We really go back and kind of think, how can we do this more systematically? Some of you are thinking, oh my God, we don't have the staff, we don't have the database, we don't have the whatever. Well, do what you can. As Wanda said, it's one foot ahead of the other. So what's the very next thing you could do to do any of this? And did I miss it? Hillary, did you have a question? Did somebody, I thought I heard someone have a question. All right. And is anything in the chat? So that's something I want you to do for next time. And I also want for your homework, for those of you who were in when Wanda did the poll and some of you were very uncomfortable or really had very little experience asking somebody for $100 to $1,000, I want you to do it this week. Find somebody, think of somebody, ask them, you know, go ahead and see what happens. You know, we learned, how do we learn to swim? How do we learn to drive? We read a little book, we see videos, but in the end, you get in the pool. If you don't ever get in the pool, you can't really honestly be said to be a person who knows how to swim. In a car, you know, you might even do a virtual reality kind of thing in some of the new modern driver's ed that they have. But at the end of the day, until you actually get in a car and drive on a real street, you cannot be said to be a driver. And I find in fundraising, unlike most things, for example, if someone says to you, I'm afraid of dogs, when someone ever says that to me, I always say, oh, have you had a bad experience with one? And I would say 99 times out of 100, they would say, yes, I had a very bad experience with a dog or two dogs or something like that. And that's why they're afraid, because they have a real experience. In fundraising, this is not true. When people say, I don't like to ask for money, or I'm afraid to ask for money. I say, oh, did you have a bad experience with it? 99 times out of 100, no, I have no experience at all. I made up a story in my head. I made a movie starring myself as big fat loser. Why did you do that? Call Quentin Tarantino, tell him to turn it around, make you the hero. So why don't you make up a movie in which you actually went and asked for the money and the person was actually nice about it? Maybe they gave it to you, or maybe they didn't. But we spend way too much of our time making up stories and then telling ourselves that that's it. And I would say once people have experience, some people who have done a lot of fundraising, they don't love it. That's fine. You don't have to love it to do it. You just have to do it. You have to love the group. You have to love the organization enough that you're willing to set aside what you feel about this and go ahead and do it. But people who have experience in fundraising don't hate it. That is, it just doesn't happen, because they have experienced generosity. They've experienced how extraordinary it is when people step up and give, and sometimes when they give actually extraordinary gifts way past what anything you thought they could do. So once you have experience, you will begin to love fundraising. I think that's absolutely true, and I think anyone could tell you that. So let's just stop, and I'll just end and see, do people, and Wanda's still with us, so we can also direct a question to her. Does anybody have a question, a comment, a story before we could call it a day? We could actually end a little early today. Any suggestions on cultivation following an anonymous gift? Okay, so there's a lot of varieties of anonymous gifts. Some are, and so one where I'll start with a kind of, it's a spectrum. So the spectrum is from the most extreme, where it is truly anonymous, and actually maybe no one in the organization knows who it is. Okay. When that's the case, don't try to find out. You are not the CIA. The person doesn't want you to know. Okay. So don't know. Don't try to find out. Don't snoop. Just be cool. They didn't want you to know. So that's fine. That's their prerogative. Then there's a kind of anonymous gift where maybe the executive director knows, or the board chair knows, or one or two people in the organization know who it is and everyone else doesn't. The people who know have an obligation to keep that knowledge to themselves. The person doesn't want to be known for whatever reason throughout the organization. And I can tell you though, in that circumstance, there's often a reason, and this is where we have to watch our language and stuff. I was once in a meeting, an organization that did a lot of work with a lot of kind of organizing in poor communities and so on. And the board was very mixed income level, very diverse. A lot of people from the neighborhood where we were organizing, and some other people. And there was one person who was actually had grown up in the neighborhood where we were organizing and now lives somewhere else. And he was on the board. He never said much. He was pretty quiet. And so, and then every year we got this $50,000 gift, which was like immense, a huge gift. It was the biggest gift. And every year the chair would say, God, someone gave us 50,000. And then inevitably someone would say, wow, who would do that? Like, why would someone who has that kind of money like us? Like, and then someone else would say, yeah, geez, you capitalist pigs, you'd think, I don't know why they would do that. And it would go on like that. And then the guy who was giving the gift was sitting right there. That was him. And I knew that, one or two other people knew that. And then you kind of think, well, why does he want to be anonymous? Well, I wonder how we're talking about him, right? And so we had this kind of conversation eventually about being just a little tiny bit more respectful. So sometimes it's something in the group that actually is causing the person who loves the group but doesn't really want to have a lot of attention aimed at them as the person, particularly if there's one or two people in an organization that have way more money than everybody else. That's going to be part of it. Sometimes anonymous, I think the most common reason for anonymous actually is they don't want to be listed in your annual report under the size of gift. When you have, and if you go to the system, which I highly recommend anyways, I think it's much more equitable, of just listing people in alphabetical order, you will see that far fewer people want to be anonymous. It's a little weird when an organization has 15 anonymous donors. You think, why are they so embarrassed about your group? What is it that you do that they have to be so embarrassed that they're giving money? So if you have a lot of anonymous donors, I think you want to kind of look and think, what is it that we, and if insofar as you know them, you might want to ask them, what could we do to help you agree to use your name, because people know you and like you and respect you, and you would be a powerful testimony for us. Okay, so here we have a couple other things. We're an advocacy organization that doesn't offer direct service. Some donors want to know where their money's going. When the answer is overhead, what's the best frame for that? Okay, so this is actually a little pet peeve of mine, that overhead is an honesty cost, right? Like a bookkeeper, what kind of a cost, when you have a line item, your bookkeeper, what is that? What is your bookkeeper? It's an overhead cost. Would you rather not have a bookkeeper? I mean, that doesn't even make sense. What's an audit? An audit actually says to donors, this group has been certified by an outside institution that they spend their money and raise their money properly, and it's all accounted for, and so on and so on. This is very reassuring to donors. An audit is an overhead cost. Overhead costs are honesty costs, okay? And we need to talk to people about that. It costs money to be an organization, and people know that. And I think they've been really trained. They've been trained, you know, by the United Way, not to make a big fuss about that, but they've been trained to ask that question, but they have no idea what they're asking about. I think it's really possible to make overhead costs seem fun, and but you roll them into your program costs too. It costs, you know, when you write to a foundation, you have to separate out your program from your overhead. But for donors, for individual donors, there's no such thing as that. There's a certain amount that it costs to be, and it includes your desk, and it includes your heat, and it includes all the kind of overhead. So that's you know, move away from that frame. I think actually a lot more people are moving away from it. Do I think organizations should have anonymous or large gift policies? No, I think organizations should have gift acceptance policies. And I will talk about this a little bit next week when we talk about planning, but a gift acceptance policy basically does say, are there any circumstances under which you would not accept a gift? And some of you are thinking, no, can't think of any, but I can think of some. I can think of an organization that I know of that owns a condo in Houston, very near an EPA Superfund site. So they can't sell it. No one can live there. They still pay property taxes on it. It was kind of a, you know, a terrible gift. I mean, the donor basically unloaded an asset that was, and got a small tax advantage for it. So if you feel you can't handle a gift, I think you don't want to take it. Some of you may think you may have some types of gifts you won't take. You won't take gifts from, I don't know, Amazon, or you won't take gifts from drugs and tobacco and weapons. That's fine. I'm not going to recommend that you have these, how you do it, but I do recommend you have a policy. You do have a policy. I have never heard of a group having a policy that they wouldn't take an anonymous gift. You could have that. I don't know exactly why you would, but this applies to it applies to all kinds of gifts. And anonymous donors may want to be anonymous because they don't want other people coming after them for the money. Yeah, I think this is especially in a small community where a lot of people know people, this can be really it. So Nathan said, what about restricted gifts? So, well, what about them, Nathan? They're restricted.
Would you ever not take them?
Would you rather not take them?
Would you ever not take a restricted?
Yeah. Oh yeah, there are many times I would not take restricted. If the restriction is too strict, if the restriction is not in keeping with mission, you know, if the restriction means that I'm not going to be able to provide the service or do the program properly, I renegotiate. Sometimes people put a restriction, or foundations this is more common, put a restriction on a gift, and they have no idea that they're actually tying you in knots by doing that. And if you go to them and tell them, you know, this is going to make it impossible to deliver this program in any kind of meaningful way, they lift the restriction. I really don't find that people hang on to that so much. I remember actually my first experience of restricted gifts, to take a tiny walk down memory lane. In 1978, I was working in this women's health organization. It was called had just a very lovely short name, the Coalition for the Medical Rights of Women. Because remember, in those days of the women's movement, we always had to have long names. That was one of the things that was required. So I went to this foundation. It was a foundation actually, and we wanted to do this lesbian health project and reach out to lesbians and look at the particular issues that lesbians face in getting health care, especially more particularly in those days. And she said, well, no, you know, our foundation would love to fund all the other stuff you're doing, but really not into lesbians. And in fact, we won't fund you if you do any lesbian healthcare, but we'll fund everything else. And she offered a sort of a generous gift if we would stop doing lesbian healthcare. And she said, you can get this other group. She named this other women's health group. You can get them to do it. It's fine. You know, the people get the service anyway, but I just can't get this past my board. I can't get this lesbian thing past my board. So I was like, oh, And I said, well, I'll see what I can do about that. So I went back to the organization and I called this woman that I knew from somewhere else. And I said, they said they would give us some money, except as, you know, we have to stop doing our lesbian health work. And she said, well, I will help raise the money, and she would give some of it, help raise it, if you will call the San Francisco Chronicle and have that be a story of this foundation, that they have offered this restriction. They've offered this money with this restriction. So I was like, okay, I'll see what I can do about that. So of course, that's what I did. And then I went to see this program officer, and she was, her hair was on fire. She was like not happy. And she goes, you said you'd see what you could do. And I said, I did what I could do. So, you know, there's no price. Your integrity, it's not like I'm a brave person or anything like that, but your integrity has no price. And never sell it. Never sell it. Somebody, and I'll tell you why, very practically, someone else will come along and pay you to have integrity. So there's really no point. Somebody said, I just asked the donor to reallocate their donation that was more urgent than the one they designated. Very good. Yeah. Yeah, we can do that. We can ask people to move their donations around. They're trying to be helpful. The donors are trying to be helpful, and they want to engage in real conversations. All right. We are coming to the end now. As usual, I will stay on a little bit if people have some question you didn't want to raise in front of the group, but you want to raise it now. That's fine. I really encourage you to contact me during the week. I got a bunch of really excellent questions and concerns, and it was great. Next week is our last week together. We're going to talk about planning, putting this kind of together in a plan, some things about segmenting, other stuff like that. And it will be your chance then to finalize the question. All the groups that are paid for by the Unitarian Universalist funding program will be getting a copy of my book, and Michelle will be taking care of that. You'll get it drop shipped to you. Is that right, Michelle? Michelle, I saw her earlier. Is she on? Oh yeah, there. You want to say something about that, Michelle?
Yes, everybody, please keep an eye out in your inbox. I will be sending you another email with a very short form to get the information so that we can distribute the books. So we're very delighted to be able to share those with you.
Thanks for that. And those of you who are not paid for by the UU funding program, it may surprise you to know that they've made enough copies of this book that you could also just buy one yourself. And I can help you find out how to do that. It is the 8th edition of Fundraising for Social Change, which I wrote first in 1985. And this one I wrote with a co-author, Stan Yogi, who's one of the partners in my my consulting firm. And it's really kind of different. And I think it's quite good. So Wanda, again, so many thanks. So many thanks for joining us. That really, really was terrific. And all of you, thanks for being on today. So I will stay on, but anyone who needs to go can go, and I will see you all next week. All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, Fia, too. Fia, thank you for running the tech. All right. Any question you have, Sam or Mary?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
Is that
Sam.
okay?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm helping our organizers that are hitting the road for the first time since COVID set up major donor meetings, and they're getting, we've hit some pitfalls, and I think a lot of it's just quantity and kind of like rearranging our parameters, but I am trying to help them with the strategy and the outreach. Because a lot of these are first time donor meetings, you wouldn't necessarily have a financial ask. So I'm kind of struggling with how to be direct, but also, like you said, like start having them build the relationship in these rural places, since they're the ones that are on the road. So just any kind of advice on how to tackle
Well,
that.
you know, it will be case by case, but in
Yeah.
general, I would say don't have money be a part of the conversation.
Okay.
Just, you know, it's been a while since we've been able to be out here. You know, how was COVID for you? Really ask a lot of questions. Here's the stuff we're going to be doing now that we can be more back in person. Anything you want to add to that? Any feedback you have about it? Thank you for what you've done. It'd be a big thank you. Actually, the main focus would be
Purpose.
thanking them. Thanks for sticking with us through a really hard time. It was a hard time for us. I'm sure it was a hard time for you. It was a hard time for everybody. And then just getting some kind of general information. And they will be more likely to do that too. They're more likely to do it well. And then they begin to build that relationship.
Okay.
In the case where somebody maybe hasn't given in a couple of years or generally gives a lot, you could make a case by case exception, but yeah.
Mhm. That's so helpful. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank
Sam.
you.
I love Rural Organizing Project, such a great group.
We love you too. I have the 7th edition now. I gotta get the 8th. All right, have a
That's
great
great.
Tuesday. Thank you all.
Take care. Bye-bye. Mary.
Oh, hi. I was going to ask, I think it was it Michelle, because I'm from a UU church. I paid for the class myself. I was wondering if I could get reimbursement from the UU, whatever central part that she's representing.
You know what? Do you have their email, Hillary or Michelle's email? I would just write to them and ask them. I'm not sure how those decisions are made.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, but I mean, they really might, or at least they might give you a free book.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I was thinking is, because I've got enough running time before I actually have to start the campaign, the pledge campaign for our church. I'm thinking of like having meetings with either me alone or me and a couple of other people who've offered to help, have meetings with all of the new people in our church to get to know them better first. And then people who in the age of COVID still we're not quite sure where they are. They haven't really come back. And so kind of just meet people first. And there isn't the time pressure of having to do the pledge campaign immediately. So, do that first.
I think that's really smart. Make them feel welcome.
Yeah.
Get to know them, especially the new people. It's very easy to go to church once and never go again.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think with COVID, I've seen with a lot of the churches that that I know people in, they say people haven't come back.
Yeah.
They haven't come back, and it's not clear that they're actually watching it online. So
Yeah.
what would it take for you to come back? We miss you, it feels very safe. We have 1 million HEPA filters. We all sit masked. I mean, whatever, I don't know, whatever's their thing,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Mary.
Thanks.
Thanks for all your questions, by the way. It's really, it's great, because otherwise you're kind of like, hello, is anyone alive?
I know. Well, yeah, I go back and forth between not being shy and not wanting to be the only voice. But
No, you're good. Pablo, hey, how you doing?
How are you, Kim? Thank you so
Good.
much. So I've really been wrestling with your content since at least last week, but frankly beforehand, mostly around the board dynamics and how to begin a culture shift at the level of the board. So I'm going back through your presentations and trying to pull the slides that I think the board should see and sit with and that sort of thing. But I did want to ask you, because I feel like I've said some of this stuff in perhaps not quite as as refined a way as you have, and it feels like it's falling on deaf ears. So I wonder, or just not landing. I'm wondering if it's because of who's delivering the message around. There's a need to build relationship. There's a need to change attitudes about fundraising. I'm wondering, how might I enter into a conversation with you about perhaps even just 1 hour with our board to talk through these issues and deliver your brilliance.
Well, that's very, that's very flattering of you. Well, you could just email me and we can figure that out, because I do that for boards. And I would say, you know, I'm on a couple boards. They do not listen to me at all. I'm just like, I might as well be just, you know, because I'm familiar. And I'm like, you know, sometimes I want to say to them, you know, people pay me to fly all over. And here I am for free sitting here. So it is, when you said it is the messenger, actually you could, you know, we could talk, or you could actually get someone down the street to come in and they will have more authority. People are like, oh, that's really good. That's really brilliant. So, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it, Pablo. Yeah. And also board dynamics. Remember, they don't change overnight. They're like any of us, we say, I'm never going to smoke, or I'm going to eat right, or I'm going to lose weight. And then we don't, right? I mean, and we don't. And then finally, maybe we do.
Well, you know, your slide about the downside of being an organization has limited resources and how that actually pollutes or sours the culture and the gusto for doing the work really got to me. So, you know, I sort of feel like that's where we are. We've been operating on a tight budget for so long, and you know, and people are just not either able or interested to become the deep-throated champions for our organization that we really need at this juncture.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's be in touch about that. How about?
Thank you, Paul.
All
Okay,
right.
bye.
All right. Thanks, Fia. I'll see you next week.